All right, good afternoon, Year 12s. I will have just seen you on WebEx, and now you're going to spend about 10-15 minutes just going through this PowerPoint that will allow you to answer the questions that you were required to do for today's lesson. And this will help you with your prac that you need to do on constraints-based coaching for Friday's lesson. So you can see here, this PowerPoint is up on Compass, it's also up on MS Teams, and it's also up on OneNote for you guys to access. So today we're going to be looking at types of coaching, we're going to be looking at social-cultural influences on movement, and we're also going to be looking at some feedback, which we've already covered as part of your sort of week 9 that you did at home at the end of last term, but we'll just re-go over some concepts if required. As always, our PowerPoints always have our key knowledge here. Let me see if I can get my little pen up. All right, so we've got our key knowledge and our key skills, and it's really important that you guys continue to go over them, that you have your study design somewhere printed up in your room so you can tick off those points as you guys work through them. That's really important as we are jumping through different chapters, so you sort of have an idea of the direction that we're heading with you guys. So to start with today, we're looking at 2 different types of coaching instruction. The first one is the direct approach to instruction. This is probably your traditional model that I feel like many of you guys would have had as you guys were growing up, and you may have had it in your PE classes as well. Essentially what it is generally you do a warm-up and then you'll learn some skills that will be very directed by the coach. And what I mean by that is the coach will be telling you exactly what to do and will be giving you constant feedback. So an example of that would just be soccer passing, just kicking the ball back and forth, and then eventually you would then move into a game. So once you've learned the skills, you can then apply it in a game. When you're practicing the skill, as I said, the coach is sort of giving you feedback, telling you exactly what to do. This limits the chance that you as a learner have to develop your own error correction on how you need to improve. So you're not really thinking a lot about the task at hand. This way of coaching is really important though for those in the beginner stage of learning. So for example, if I was to teach my Year 7s lacrosse, there is no way that I could just sort of get into a game. They'd need to do basic partner passing, because when they do lacrosse for the first time, you can't throw, you can't catch, you can't run with the ball in your racket without it falling. So there's no way that we could get a game to work. So in terms of the direct, this would be, as I said, we've got some sort of warm-up, we've got a skill, and then we practice the skills, and then we just go into a game. So again, I've already used that example there. This is a really important concept to be aware of. When you do direct-based instruction, you will get better at a skill quicker. However, that doesn't necessarily translate into a game. So you may appear as you're really good at soccer passing now, but you may not be able to apply that to a game. So as soon as you move into a game-like situation, your skills may actually be quite poor, and you may not look like you actually know exactly what you're doing because you're not learning under pressure. Okay, and so that's a really key thing, that you may learn how to do something quicker, but doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be better as time goes on as you move into game-like situations. So then we talk about the constraints-based coaching. So that's when we essentially make modifications to games that allows learners to focus on different concepts. So we've spoken about 3 types of constraints already. So we've got our individual, all right, our environmental, and our task. And we can essentially focus on all of those. So if we know that we fatigue really easily, we could modify the activity. So there's heaps of running, so they learn how to cope under fatigue, for example. Or environment, we can change at times to move indoors or outdoors. We can change different surfaces, but the main one we can really change is our task constraints. Okay, and when we change task constraints, we need to have a reason why. We want to help them develop a skill. So what I mean by that, I might still go back here. So say I have 3 versus 4 soccer players, and those that are in the team of just 3 trying to pass the ball around. So they're at a disadvantage because they've got 1 extra defender against them. This hopefully would mean that students will then know that they can't just stand there. They have to move into space or move away from their defender. So therefore, we are practicing the concept of moving into space. All right, I wouldn't be standing there telling them what to do. I would be watching the students, and they sort of have to learn by themselves on how they need to improve. So therefore, it's learner-directed, and the teacher, all right, is just the facilitator. So we're watching and we're there to give guiding questions, which I'll speak about in the next slide. We want learners to work them out themselves, okay? And although they may be a bit slower in working it out at the start, or their skills may not be great at the start, it means they're much more equipped for that game-like situation, okay? And we're doing lots of problem solving, which again helps with that learning retention. This is something you would definitely do with more your associative or autonomous learners. There's more variation, it's more interesting, okay? And so you're more likely to keep learners engaged. If you were to do something like this with beginner stage of learning, they might find it so hard that they will not be interested. So that's why you need to gauge where your learners are at and then change your coaching accordingly. All right, so here's just an example. So I will keep moving through. You guys can read through that. And then we talk here about perception action coupling. So you just need to be aware of what this concept means. It sounds a little bit confusing, so we'll just break it down here. So perception essentially is what you see. So by doing a constraints-based coaching, you will see certain things like the way that people move or the way that they pass. That will then lead you to do a certain type of action, and the action that you do will then change what you see, and then we keep going in this circle. Okay, so therefore we're talking about how your actions influence what you see. So if you pass the ball and you just stand there, you'll see people moving in front of you and you getting stuck behind. Whereas if you then have an action and then you move into space, you change what you see and you might be in a position to get the ball back again. So okay, so it's about, again, just the learner having a real think about what they need to do. They're not just doing something and not thinking about it. They're seeing what they're seeing what's happening, and then they make an action accordingly, which will then change what they see, and it just keeps going around and round. This is really important in the use of games. All right, so game sense is just a type of constraints-based coaching, essentially. So it uses small-sided modified games to develop tactical and strategical thinking, as well as movement skill performance. So a key part here is first, it has to be a modified game. And then, as I said, those modifications will hopefully focus on particular things. The second thing here is the coaches here are just giving guiding questions. And this is a really important part as a coach. You can't say, do this. So you can't say you needed to move into space there, or you need to flick your fingers more when you shot the ball in netball. You need to ask them questions that makes them think about what they need to do. So as a coach, I might say, for someone shooting, I might say, okay, that ball fell short, but the one before it didn't. What do you think was the difference? And I might be like, oh, I don't think I bent my knees enough. Okay, so you're trying to make the learner, think about what is going on and what they need to do by that situation. All right, we're going to go through these questions soon, so we'll keep moving through. Stages of learning, I'm not going to really go over as we've been over this quite a lot of time. So we've got our 3 stages there, and these 2 slides here are really important. So we've already gone through them, but I would hope that they're in your notes somewhere. You need to be able to acknowledge or understand what the learner will look like and what the coach needs to do. Because without a doubt, in a SAC or in an exam, you'll be given a situation where you need to analyse a person, you need to identify what stage of learning they're in and what as a coach you can do to support them. All right, moving through. So now, okay, so that's just learning, like overall with stages of learning. How do we support students or learners in different stages of learning? This is what we're going to talk about now. What can they do to affect movement, and how can different factors affect people in different stages of learning? So this is actually a quite complex dot point. And as I think I've already said in class, a lot of information about sociocultural influences on skill development have been in the last 2 years of exams. All right, so we know that there are 2 types of coaching. So now we need to figure out, depending on these things, what kind of coaching are we required to do? So sociocultural factors refer to social and cultural, and they can often break them in, kind of like when we talk about cardiovascular, we can talk about cardio and we talk about vascular. So similar thing here, there's an overarching one, but we can actually break them down. All right, it's about practices, beliefs, or traditions within a community or society that encourage, so it's important to say they can have a positive or a negative influence on your involvement in sport. Okay, and therefore, if we're more or less involved in sport, that will impact our movement skills. So there's a few slides here that go through the different types of sociocultural factors. So the first one there is families. So again, if your parents are willing to drive you to practice or not willing, that will have an impact on you being involved in sport and therefore developing our skills. And there's a range of different things here. I won't go through them one by one, but it's really important that you read through these and add them to your notes. In regards to social, cultural, norms, traditions, and beliefs. All right, so we've got here some positives. So Australia, we have a really big swimming culture here. So we have a lot of really successful swimmers. In Kenya, long distance runners is considered really important. So that might encourage them to get into running. Canada with ice hockey, we've spoken about Jamaicans with the sprinters. So in these countries, they are highly regarded, almost like a celebrity. They may be idols to people, and therefore people are more likely to want to do it. Okay. We also have some environmental advantages here as well. Some barriers. So some conservative environments don't encourage women to be involved in sports, so therefore you're less likely to be involved, therefore less likely to improve your movement skills. And there are a range of different things here. So racism, discrimination, political unrest, and so forth. Okay, so let me just pause. And now I just briefly wanted to go through feedback. You all should have done your feedback prac. I am having, as I think I probably would have told you, some issues getting onto OneNote this afternoon, but hopefully you've done your feedback prac. And you were able to see the difference between all the different types of feedback. We haven't spoken a lot about frequency of feedback, so I'll go through that briefly with you guys now. So types of feedback, so we've got our intrinsic feedback to start off with. So that is something that you as a learner receive. So this can be visual, so seeing if the ball goes in the ring. Auditory, you can hear the sound of the racket as the ball hits it. Proprioception, so movement of body parts. So this one's harder to describe as such, but so for example, as I've said to you guys a million times, like I've been playing netball for a really long period of time, and when I shoot the ball, I know exactly if it's going to go in or not, and that's because I can feel the way my body moves. I can feel if I'm jerky. I know if I haven't flicked my fingers. So it's that muscle movement that I can feel that allows me to get that feedback on why I was or wasn't successful. The last one there is also touch. So when you touch something, so when you throw something, you may also feel that get some feedback from that as well. Augmented can also be called intrinsic feedback, and that comes from an external source. So that is a really common example is your coach. It may be watching yourself on video, in your next training session. And then we've got lots of different monitors. So for example, I think I've spoken about my friend who was doing an Ironman in Kuala Lumpur, I think it was really hot, and he was able to look at his heart rate monitor and realize his heart rate was way too high, and then coupled with the fact that he wasn't sweating even though it was really hot, he was able to recognize his body was under severe fatigue, he had to stop. So you can use lots of different things to get feedback as part of your augmented feedback. That can be either during the activity, so that's called concurrent, or after the activity, which is called terminal feedback. So it might be worth putting them into your glossary. We then can break feedback into knowledge of results and knowledge of performance. So knowledge of results is simply the outcome of the task. Did it go in or not? All right. Did the ball go in the hoop? Did the ball go in the correct serving square? Speed, so by able to see how quickly you serve the ball. Again, that's all about knowledge of results. Knowledge of performance is about how you do it. Okay, so the way that your body moves is to be able to complete that outcome. So when you serve, knowledge of performance might be like, oh, you didn't stretch high enough. When you hit the ball, your arm was too far forward. You bounced the ball too far in front of you before you served, etc. So you can keep reading through that. Frequency of feedback. So you need to be aware that you need to give a fair bit of feedback in the early stages of learning, okay, because they do have really poor error correction. All right, so I can't understand whether they're going right or wrong. That said, you don't want to give too much, so you don't want to overload them, okay, because it disrupts their learner's attention. So if I was teaching someone how to shoot netball, there's probably like 7 different things that they need to be aware of. I would maybe go through 2 to start with, and then I can add on as I go. That said, if you give too much feedback, especially in those later stages of learning, the learner becomes so dependent on you that they can't error correct themselves, and that will mean that they're not very good in a game-like situation. Okay, so you have to be able to eventually use pretty much only intrinsic feedback. All right, that is it. All right, I have 40 seconds to spare before this will finish. So now, hopefully you have watched this. You can go on to your OneNote or onto Compass. There is a document under class notes on OneNote, and you need to answer or continue to answer those questions and then upload them onto your OneNote. If you can't upload them on OneNote, can you please send them as an MS Team chat? All right, thanks guys.